others sometimes won't get behind that. And that's okay, because I think that just means you're finding the right people to surround you with, right? It goes back to that quote I had a while ago. It's like, make friends with people who will defend you in rooms you aren't in, because those are the ones that are going to help you overcome your fears. My friends, my family, welcome back to another episode of Getting After It. Excited to talk about today's topic because it's one that I think we're all, unfortunately, a little bit too familiar with. We'll get into it in a second. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone for being patient as, you know, I go through life's transitions here. As I mentioned in the last episode, I just got married. I started a new job, and a lot of things have just been going on to where it's been really, really difficult to record and find time to do so, set it aside, and get specific about what I want to talk about. But that said, like, I've talked about the importance of consistency too many times on this podcast to where I would feel like a hypocrite at the time if I wasn't being consistent with this. So the studio is still being built. I have a desk that's coming to my house in like 5 days. Once that's here, I'll build it out, set it all up, and then you'll see some videos starting to come through again. I'll start posting more clips and all that jazz. So just stay tuned, but I appreciate everyone being patient for that. Thank you for listening to this episode. I'm excited to talk about what we are going into. Like I mentioned, this is something that we're all too familiar with. Everyone's had experience with it. Everyone has felt the ups and downs of this and the impact that it's had on their life, the control that they've let it have on their life. And what the topic that we're going to be going into is fear, because fear is something that we can all overcome. Obviously, it's easier said than done, but it's something that if you are specific about what you want to accomplish, if you are intentional with your decisions, then fear is something that can be easily overcome. And I say easy intentionally. Like, if you actually want to do something, set the steps in place and just do it. And we'll go into some things, some stories, some examples. But I want to start out with this quote. I found this quote, and I told Allie that this is one of my favorite quotes now. It's from Theodore Roosevelt, the U.S. president who kind of looks like a clown. He played really great. He was a great role in Night at the Museum. He did great in that movie. So if you don't know who Theodore Roosevelt is, go watch Night at the Museum. Anyways, it's a long quote, so bear with me on this. But he starts out like this. It is not the man who counts, or it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. That's kind of an intense quote, but it's one of my favorites because it's so direct. He says it. He says, you gotta try hard to really put yourself out there and do the thing that you're afraid of. Because if you don't, at least you can go down swinging, right? At least you can go down saying, "Hey, I gave it my best shot. I know I tried. I might have failed, but at least I did it. Like I said, I wanted to do something, and I set a plan in place to do it." And it's a quality I think we all strive for, right? Like I said in the beginning, it's easier said than done on this kind of stuff. But it is something that I think if you do focus on it, if you focus on ways that you can overcome your own fear and really strive to put yourself out there and try the thing that you're thinking about, you'll be better off because you're going to learn about yourself. During my marathon recap episode, I talked a lot about this. When you go and you accomplish things like this, you try and set yourself out to push the limits, then you learn more about yourself in that circumstance than I think you do in any others. And it's difficult. Like, there's no question to say, like, oh yeah, if I go try something and fail, and the outcome isn't what I expected, and you know what? I think anyone who's gone through life would probably tell you that you're ridiculous for not thinking that you wouldn't be hurt by that. The difference is, and I heard David Goggins talking about this once, he says he doesn't look at failure as failure, he looks at it as attempts. And so that could be you too. So you attempt one thing once, you fail, okay, well, that's when you take a step back and you think about areas that you could improve, get a little bit better at, and then next time you try it, you're going down swinging. You're giving it your all, and you're not going to be, with those souls who are cold and timid, who neither know victory nor defeat. If you don't know victory or defeat, you're pretty much just going through life, not really challenging yourself, just kind of sitting around doing whatever you want, right? So keep that in mind. Like, as I start talking about some of these stories and going into the actual topic of fear, where it comes from, just keep that in mind. Like, think about where you want to be. Do you want to be known as someone who, let's say you never achieve your goals, okay? But you never not try them, if that makes sense. You're always someone who goes after your goal, but for some reason you can never achieve them. In my opinion, that's someone who I would admire a lot more than someone who's, it seems like success has happened to them overnight. But the person who just has that dog in him, who's not giving up, who's fighting like uncontrollably, who gets knocked down, but then somehow finds the courage to stand back up and go again, that's the person that I want in my foxhole. And if you don't get the foxhole reference, go listen to my last podcast. And those are the people who I want next to me, because I know if I'm worried about something, if I'm curious about whether or not I can do X, Y, or Z, and I go talk to that person who I keep close next to me, and they reassure me, you know what? Hey, at least go try it. That's the person I want next to me. Like, I don't want anyone who's going to be like, yeah, it's okay. Oh man, you didn't get a sub-3 marathon. That's all right. No, I want the person who says, you didn't get a sub-3 marathon. Okay, let's get you into a better training program. What could you have done better this time? I don't want that, easy life, because I wrote this today. I think I mentioned a few times on this podcast that I like writing, right? But one thing that I've realized about myself is like I strive for struggle, and not in the sense of like, oh, I need tragedies to happen to me in my life, or I need emotional struggles. It's like, no, what I mean by struggle is like physical pursuits, because my life's pretty easy. I have a desk job and all these things, at least like easy in the sense of physical, right? I'm not out there cutting down trees so I can have firewood for the wintertime. It's like all that stuff is pretty easy. And so having this struggle helps me figure this stuff out. And I talked to Allie about this, actually. I struggled on our honeymoon because we were on a cruise and I felt like I was going crazy. I was stuck in this little tiny cabin. We'd go out to the pool and we'd go to the islands and things like that. But on the cruise days, when we didn't have any of the activities planned or anything like that, and it was tough. I'm not going to lie to you, because I don't know. I felt like I was just kind of wasting away, and a lot of that's myself. I recognize I have a problem, so I apologized many times to Allie for that. But she was very patient with me, and she was like, you know what? Hey, it's okay. I think I told her once, I was like, hey, I'm going to go walk for a while, and I just walked on a treadmill overlooking the ocean, listening to people talk on podcasts and stuff. But it's like, I don't know, I crave that, and I need that in my life. And so I don't want someone to, if my goal is to run a sub-3 marathon in February, if for some reason I don't prepare enough, if my training's not dialed in enough, and I fail that goal and I don't hit it, and I don't reach that sub-3, then I want that person who's going to be like, man, what's going on? You trained for this long, you could have done X, Y, and Z. Let's get you back. Let's do it again. You're going to do a sub-3. You said you're going to. It just wasn't this time. It was attempt number 1. Attempt number 2 is when you're going to get it. That's what I want. And to her credit, Allie is that person for me. No matter what it is in life, I can go to her and she'll hype me up and she'll tell me to go try something. not once with this podcast, and I know it could be very cringy at times, but not once with this podcast has she been like, stop doing it. And I don't know. I've talked about this before, the imposter syndrome that I felt with starting a podcast like this. And like, I don't know, for her, I can kind of imagine her in her head being like, man, this thing, and he is passionate about it, but holy cow, like it is kind of cringy, all this stuff. I can see her saying that kind of thing, and to be fair, like I'm sure she has, and you don't have to lie. It's okay, Al. I still love you. But she never has said that once. It's been the complete opposite. She says, you know what, like, share your message. Go talk about your story. Try and bring people on who can inspire other people, because that's needed nowadays. It's never once been like, hey, I don't like what you're doing. This is kind of weird. You don't have a lot of followers yet or a big listening audience. Like, maybe you should take a step back and put your time into something else. But she sees that I have a passion for this, and she supports me more than anyone else. And again, that's the kind of person I want to be with me and in my foxhole and supporting me. So that was kind of a tangent. I apologize, but it's an important concept to have. You want people like that who, when you go after something you're scared of or fearful of, they're by your side and they're walking you through it. They're there to support you. They're not there to, demoralize you or be a fake person. All right, I'm going to rant for a second, actually, because that's the biggest thing that I hate is when someone will come to me and they'll be like, hey, I'm thinking about, doing a marathon. I don't know. And then I'm pumped up about it, right? I'm like, hey, listen, you're going to face these challenges. This is really what your experience is going to be like. You're going to have days when you don't want to train. You're really going to have to spend time figuring out what kind of nutrition works for you, because it's different for everybody. And so I usually try and be real when people talk to me about that kind of thing, because I want them to know, like, if they're actually committed to it, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be something that they're going to need to really focus on, put some time and effort in, and just work into it, really. That's like the only way to say it. You have to work with this kind of stuff. It's a lot of work going into a marathon. People say that they want to do it, but do you actually want to? And if you do actually want to, then come to me and I'll support you. But there are people who will go up to others, and those people who they go to, and they're like, hey, I'm going to run a marathon. That person's saying, yeah, you should run a marathon. You can do it. And then turns out, maybe the person who was running doesn't accomplish it. They go back to that same person and be like, man, yeah, unfortunately I didn't finish it, or I didn't start. Like, I wasn't prepared enough. And that person would say, yeah, marathons are tough. I was just hoping to get you excited a little bit. But that's the kind of person that just pisses me off. If you're going to be fake about something, I don't know, go to Disneyland. That's a place you can be fake at. Go pretend to be Mickey Mouse and go hang out and eat some churros. I don't know. But don't be fake to someone who's looking for help. You know what I mean? Like, be an actual support to them. I talked about that last podcast too, is you have to be a support system to other people if you're looking to find that support for yourself. You got to give back. That's an important part of, I think, just life in general, is you give back. And people will talk about that with like the law of attraction, right? You give or you get what you give. And to an extent, that's true. Like, if you want to become a better marathon runner, sorry, I just keep going on this example, but I think it's important. Don't go talk to people who haven't run marathons. Go speak to the person who is sitting next to you, who runs on their lunch break and is wild, like, in that sense. Go talk to that person, because I'm sure that they'd have a little bit more insight than the person who's like, yeah, you can do hard things. Just do it. So that's what I would say, is try and find people who would support you around your goals, or in the case of fear, since we're talking about that, go talk to people who've done it before. That's the easiest way that you can get ahead of your own fears, is there's evidence that people have done it. Go after it. I'm going to tell another story on this part, because for a while, marriage was something that I feared for a long, long time. And bear with me as I go through this example, because I promise I'll bring it back. But it was something I was worried about. The reason being is, one, Now in my head, I'm accountable and responsible for taking care of this person, who's now Allie. And Allie, I love you. Thanks for agreeing to marry me. Legit. Now I have to get, I need to take care of Allie. That's a huge fear for me. And I want to make sure she has a great life. I want to make sure she's healthy. I want to make sure she's taken care of financially. And she doesn't have to worry about those kind of things. I want her to be able to follow her dreams and for me to be that support to her. A lot of that's scary because you don't know what the world's going to bring. That said, I have so much evidence of other couples who, in my opinion, aren't as happy as Allie and I. And, they're doing just fine. And if they can do it, then so can I. And to that same point, if there's something you're scared of, but you know other people have done it, go find those people and ask them how they did it. I took a new job in a closing sales role now, and it's a little bit more intense. Actually, no, scratch that. It's a lot more intense. But I know I can do it because there's so many other people who have done it before me, and there's so much content on either the internet or within these people's brains that I can go ask them questions about it and see how they did it, see how they overcame certain objections, see what their first presentation was like. All this stuff. There's evidence out there, and I could just go pursue it. I heard this other quote today, and I love this. It's it hits pretty close to home because I think a lot of times people are always like, oh, I'm sad or I'm anxious. Here's how the quote goes. Sadness comes from a lack of options, which is why it feels like hopelessness. Let me pause there for a second. So if you are, in my instance, going into a new sales position where you're going to have a higher quota, more duties, more responsibilities, more things to take care of, more tasks to take care of at work, if you don't know what you're doing, that could feel hopeless. You could feel hopelessness in that. And at the beginning, I kind of have at some points. But to his point, sadness comes from a lack of options. And the rest of the quote, he says, anxiety comes from many options, but a lack of priorities, which is why it feels like paralysis. Looking everywhere, but moving nowhere. To finish it out, he says, solve sadness with knowledge and anxiety with a decision. So if I don't know something about sales, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling kind of sad because I don't think I could do it. What do I not know about it? And how can I fix that? What can I go learn that would get me out of my situation? So a good example of that is I had to learn an entire new software that I have to pitch, right? That's pretty overwhelming. And I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. I'm not going to feel sad about it because there's so much knowledge out there that I can go ask specific questions about the software so I can sell it better. So, long story short, if you're feeling like, you don't know enough about a topic before you want to start something, or I had this conversation with, well, let me finish that thought, then I'll tell you my conversation. One thing I'm trying to get better at this podcast is not jumping around as much, so bear with me on that too. But if you're scared to start something, try and learn where you could improve your knowledge on it, and I guarantee you'll be off in a better place. So just sit that. But another thing I get asked a lot is I've been doing this podcast. This is episode 36, so that's pretty cool. According to podcast statistics, I'm in the top 1% because after you get past 20 episodes, you're in the top 1% of podcasts. So I'm a 1%er, baby. Everyone asks me, at least some people do, I want to start a podcast. What equipment do I need? I want to start a podcast. What kind of softwares to use to edit? My thing is you don't need all that stuff. You need the very bare minimum, and then you just need to start. And then from there, you can go and tailor it. Right now, I'm recording this podcast in the closet because my desk isn't set up. But to that point, I want to be consistent. I want to get this content out there. I want to get better myself. I want to continue to try and improve on how I do this podcast. I want to make it valuable for the listener. And that's going to take reps. It's going to take a repetition. I'm going to have to learn where I say too much, like I just did. Or certain things that people don't really care about, certain topics, because I'm sure I've covered a few where some people have either tuned down, like turned the radio out, tuned me out, zoned out, or skipped it. And that's okay. That's totally okay. I know this isn't going to be for everyone, but to that point, I still want to refine my content, because for me, this podcast is almost becoming like a what I wish I had when I was growing up podcast. I wish I had someone who was telling me these kind of things. Like, hey, you are going to be faced with fears, but here's how you overcome them. Here's some strategies you can take. Or, hey, maybe you want to run a marathon. Okay, well, let's document some training. I'll tell you about my nutrition. Maybe you can apply a few principles. Oh, you want to talk to some guy about leadership? You want to be a better leader? I'm going to bring on someone from Echelon Front, who, in my opinion, is the highest leadership consulting agency in the U.S. Shout out to Echelon Front. Go check them out. Jocko, I got your back. I always will. Anyways, I'm going to try and bring things on, bring people along, talk about topics I wish I knew a little bit more about growing up. So then that way, my kids or someone who's just in the room listening to this can listen and be like, hey, I'm going to try this, because if he's saying it's possible, then I'm going to do it. I just want to be that evidence for other people, because you can't. There's enough evidence out there where you can overcome these things. So that's the first part I want to talk about fear. It's just like taking the first step into it, like go into it. Just start. Because that's the biggest thing that I would say is, like, if you can just start, you're already ahead of the game. And the bar's never been set lower for success these days. If you just start, you're already ahead. So at least take that for, you should be pretty pumped on that. But there is another aspect of fear that I want to talk about really quickly. And I'm going to bring up my sister-in-law, Emily. I asked her if I could talk about her story, and she said yes. So thank you, Emily. You're legit. But Emily is actually, so when she first joined the family, she ran a half marathon with my mom. And this was maybe 5 years ago, I want to say, 4 or 5 years ago. But she ran a half marathon with my mom, so I always thought of her as like some big runner. And, life happens. They moved up to college, or like her and my brother moved up to college. And life gets busy. She had a job. She went to school. My brother had a job. He went to school. So there's like little time for training, right? Because they still want to spend time together. And I feel that now, like having a wife, like I want to spend as much time with her as I can. And so when people say life gets busy, they mean it. It's hard, but Emily's story continues. She now has a 4-year-old little kiddo. Actually, I don't know if he's 4. If I got that wrong, Emily, I'm sorry, but she's got one kiddo, and then they had another kid, and now they're going to bring on another, so they're going to have 3 kids, right? That's intense. But Emily's always been this person who's talked about running, who's been excited about running, who I know has a passion for it, because like even when it was 110 degrees outside, I remember her posting pictures of like, hey, I ran 10 miles today outside and it was great, and I saw beautiful trees and all this stuff. She was always positive about it. And I'm like, in my head, before I got into running, I was like, that looks like hell. Don't lie to yourself. Anyways, she never did, but she always had the best attitude around it. Like even this past weekend, she posted a video of her running. I think she did like 6 miles, but she's like singing Lizzo. I'm feeling good as hell. And it was dope. It's just like she's back into it. She's training for a half marathon in November right now. And I talked to her a little bit. She was just telling me like, she's afraid of not having enough time to spend with her kids, with her husband, but she still wants to train. She still wants to do these things that she used to be able to when she had all the time in the world, right? And now she's like seeing the struggle and seeing how you have to balance your time in order to be a good person, right? Like you can't just neglect your kids, and if you want to run a half marathon, like I think in that sense you'd be a bad person, right? So she wants to just have this example for her kids of, what, even when life challenges you and all these things, it requests so much time from you in all aspects of it. Like you can still push yourself and do hard things. And it's really admirable. Like she said, because I was asking her, I was like, yeah, do you mind if I talk about your story on my podcast a little bit? And I was like, yeah, I think your example's amazing. And she said this quote, and I thought it was really, really good. She said, even though they're young, I hope I can teach them that they can do hard things. It's also rewarding to know I can accomplish these things. I can accomplish these things I'm setting my mind to. So there's two things to that. Yes, one, she had a fear that she wouldn't have the time that she needed to in order to continue developing these relationships with her kids, making sure they're taken care of and fed, and spending time with my brother, and then doing things that she wants, because that's also a very important thing in life, is you have to have balance where, you can take a step back and, in my case, play Minecraft or read a book or do things that is just like me time, right? You have to have that too. Sometimes training can be that. It is for me at times, but not for everyone. And Emily's able to find time to do all these things and still be a great mom, be a great wife, be a good person, and help out where she can. She's got 3 kids. And there's no excuses there. And that's what I love about it, is like fear oftentimes is disguised as excuses. And she's not like that. She's got a fight in her where she's like, I'm going to give everything I can. And I'm not going to stop. I got 3 kids. And I'm still going to push myself. There's a lot to learn from that, because I make that excuse all the time. And I really do believe that quote, like, fear is disguised as excuses at times. But I can find myself, like, after a long day, I get back from the office at 6. This happened actually this past week. I started a new role, and so I want to just learn as much as I can in such a short amount of time. But this one day I left the office at 7, and I didn't get back I left for the office at 7, didn't get back till 6. I worked out before then. And when I got back, I think Allie, she had a what's called a night flight. As I mentioned, she's a flight instructor, so she's just a badass. That's the only way to really say it. But she has to like fly at nights sometimes with her students and teach them all the procedures that go into that. So I was all alone by myself, and I was like kind of feeling sorry for myself. I'm like, man, I wish I could, spend time with Allie or do things that I want to. Instead, I just decided just to keep working, and not the best decision, to be very honest. Like I probably could have used some me time at the time, but the excuse could have just been like, oh man, I'm tired, I'm gonna go to bed. But Allie inspired me. She's like doing the same kind of hours, like working long shifts. She's got all her students doing their basic final exams this next week. So she's putting in long hours. And for me, I'm like, what's my excuse? Like, she's out there flying right now. I could go to sleep, but that's just stupid. Like, I'd rather study, give it my all, try my best. And you know what? I'll get sleep eventually. Sleep's important. I don't want to discount that at all, but I have a hard time with it, so I'm struggling with it anyways. The point of the story being, like, yeah, at least I tried, right? It's like, you have to overcome that fear of trying. Or, yeah, that's it. You have to overcome the fear of trying. You have to overcome the fear of starting. And I think once you do that, you learn a lot about yourself, and you figure out who you are. Because if you want to become someone who you haven't become yet, right? If you want to do things you've never done but you want to, you're going to have to change some things about your behaviors. There's this quote that I think is great. It says, the only way to become more successful than most people is to be willing to do something most people aren't willing to do. In Emily's case, it's running with 3 kids, having a husband, having a social life, but still pursuing her goal because that's what she wants. If she's going to be successful in that, it's because she's going to be doing things that other moms aren't doing. And I'm not saying people are bad, but that's just the facts. Like, you have to. And it's an important thing to remember. So, obviously, fear is going to be hard, or hard to overcome. But I will say this, the more that you do it, the more times that you try and challenge yourself and you really put yourself out there, start small and progress in like I've said in many, many times in this podcast, consistency compounds. No one's successful who isn't consistent. Consistency doesn't necessarily guarantee success, but not being consistent will for sure guarantee you will not be successful. And overcoming fear, you can apply a lot of those principles to it. It's like, do one thing that scares you every day. I don't know if you've seen The Office, but there's this guy gets a lot of bad rap, but he's one of my favorite characters, Robert California. He has this going away party. I can't really remember what's happening. I think he's going through a divorce. Robert is. He sells his mansion, and he throws this giant party the night before with everyone from the office. So everyone's going there. I think this is when Michael's gone. So it's like Jim, Pam, all those good people, right? And Robert California just decides to get naked at their indoor pool, right? He just rips off all his clothes and jumps in the pool. And then he says this quote that I hate that I remember it all the time, but I really do think about this all the time. He goes, "It's not a party unless you do something that scares you." And as bad as an example that is, you can learn from that quote. Like, hey, it's not a party if you don't do something that doesn't scare you. So apply that to your day-to-day. Be like Robert California. I'm not saying jump into a pool naked, but like if you got something that's the equivalent of that, like, man, this is maybe it's going to the gym. That people get scared of that, and there's a reason being, because there's a stigma behind people who go to the gym, right? Like you should look a certain way, all these things. But if you just overcome your fear and just go, like, hey, the party started, baby. Now you just did something that scared you. Just show up the next day, and just keep overcoming that fear. And soon enough, you'll realize fear is it's almost procrastination. So it can be disguised as excuses or procrastination, in my opinion. But you got to just try and overcome it, and you'll get better at it. And it's going to be hard. I'm not going to lie to you. I think one thing I want this podcast to be is very real. So I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie about that. But it teaches you so much, and you learn so much about yourself, and you become who you want to become. So overcoming fear has so many more, I think, positive benefits than negative. And again, you got to look at it like David Goggins does. If you do end up failing, then go after attempt number 2. Attempt number 1 has a lot that you can learn from. So learn from those principles, learn from where you misstepped, and go after number 2. Because that's where you're going to grow and learn. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to think of it that way. The other thing that I want to talk about is, like, guess what? Everyone who, if you're feared of judgment, okay, that's a big one. I think a lot of people face. I do for sure. Like, this past week, I thought in my head, I was like, man, do I want to be a tryhard and go at this new job and give it everything I got? And, I might come off as a tryhard to the team and all these things. And then in my head, I'm like, yeah, I do. I want to come off as a tryhard. I want people to know I'm working hard. The reason being is because that's exactly who I think I am. I'm someone who works hard and applies themselves and really just puts their best foot forward. And so if I didn't try hard, then I'd be going against my morals, or I'd be going against who I think I am. And that, in a sense, is scary. It's like, you're going to pretend to be someone else so you can have the opinions of others look at you, right? Like, oh man, this Brett kid, he seems to be getting it right, but he's a cool guy. It's like, no, I'd rather be someone who's like, oh, this Brett kid, he's getting it. He's understanding the principles and the concepts, and he's going out the gate on fire. And if they want to judge me for that, then let them. But I want to give him my best shot. And the point I'm trying to make here is, like, the fear of judgment for others is something that I hope, if you're listening to this, you don't take that seriously. Obviously, if you're doing something stupid and people are judging you for it, like if you're running the streets like Robert California naked and people are like, what are you doing? Like, you're going to get arrested. You should probably listen to that kind of stuff. That kind of judgment's good. What I'm talking about is like social judgment, like, oh man, this guy's trying a little bit too hard. He's doing something difficult. Like, oh man. Or, hey, there he goes again, talking about another marathon. It's like, I know what I like. I know what I like talking about. That's important to me. But the best way to overcome the fear of judgment of others is realize everyone's going to be dead, including yourself. And do you want to live a life to where you're in the fear of other people's opinions? Or do you want to live a life that you're proud of and you like the quote says, you don't know a place. Like, you shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor death. So think about that. Eventually you want to get to the point to when your friends, if they would have said something like, hey, you've changed, man, you got to remember it's because they don't know how to say you've grown. Like, that's the difference. You might have changed, and that's a good thing. But others sometimes won't get behind that. And that's okay, because I think that just means you're finding the right people to surround you with, right? It goes back to that quote I had a while ago. It's like, make friends with people who will defend you in rooms you aren't in, because those are the ones that are going to help you overcome your fears. They're going to be there to support you and be around with you. So realize everyone's going to be dead soon. And because of that, you should have no reason not to go after things that you're interested in pursuing, or things that you might have been scared of doing in the past. And that's kind of dark. It's kind of morbid a little bit, but it's true. Like, true hell is you meeting the person you could have become, in my opinion. And you have to remember that. It's like, okay, if you want to try something, go do it. And if you fail, learn from it. Because the best guarantee to not have the life you want is to do what everyone else is doing. And if there's something that scares you and you think it'll change your life, then by all means, you should try it. Put yourself out there. Life's very short, so make the most of it. A lot of reasons, like, I've been asked this a lot with just in regards to running, and I apologize I keep bringing up this example, but it means a lot to me now. Running does. I've learned a lot from it, about myself, about others, and one thing that I think is just amazing about running is when people start to try it and they see themselves succeeding, they see growth, they get so excited and they want to tell me about it. And that's my favorite part about running. It's not about what I can do about myself. It's about others seeing that potential in them and then just grabbing onto it and just attacking. But people ask me all the time, they're like, aren't you worried about what it's doing to your body? Like, if you're putting in these many miles? Yeah, I am. I am worried about that. I had this conversation with Allie the other day. It's like, it's one of my fears is, what if one day I wake up and I can't run? Like, my body's in shambles. I'm sure it'll get to that point. I've read too many stories about that. There's the evidence piece again. I've read too many stories. I've seen too many case studies about people who have just overworked their body. But not once have I ever heard anyone from those stories or those case studies or anything like that say they regretted it. And that's it. I refuse to live a life of regret. And so if I enjoy running, I'm going to enjoy the hell out of it now. I'm going to learn all the lessons it's teaching me. I'm going to try and push myself for things like sub-3s. After I do a sub-3, the goal's an ultra. I want to do my first ultra marathon, whether that's 40 miles or 100 miles. Time will tell, but that's the next step. That's the next goal for me. Obviously, sub-3 comes first. And training-wise, I'm on my way there. But it was crazy. I was going through my old runs with Allie way back when I first started back in like 2021. That's when I signed up for my first half marathon ever that I couldn't run because of health reasons. But my mile times then, I was stoked about it. I looked at it and it was like 7 miles in an hour and a half. And I was like, I remember sitting on the treadmill afterwards being like, dang, I made it this far. I did it. I've never run that far in my entire life. And this past weekend, I ran 10 miles in 10 miles, I think, at a 120 pace. My goal is to break that down to 115 next Saturday. But to the point is, like, I've seen that progress, and I don't know what I'm capable of, but I'm going to test it, and I'm going to see. Because fear is, it's just limiting. That's really it. Don't be limited by fear, because you're worth way more than that. If you're scared of something, as always, I'm a resource and I want to be that for you. If you're getting after something, hey, listen, I will talk to you all day long. Because that's the point of this podcast, is to see your potential in yourself, right? And fear is one of those ways where you can instantly discount that potential. You don't even have to, really, like I said, fear can be disguised as excuses. And so you can easily say like, hey, I'm not a runner. I don't think I could ever run a marathon. But you got to start. You might not be right now, but you could be, 2 years down the road, you could run a marathon. That's what happened to me. I wasn't a runner. 2 years later, I was. And now I'm running marathons, and now I'm training for things I never thought I would ever be talking about, because I was never a runner growing up in high school or any of that. The point is, I wouldn't have known unless I tried. So go try something difficult. Be consistent at it. Overcome your fears over and over and over again. Do something small to overcome your fear, one day at a time, and you'll get there. Fear won't control your life anymore. That's the thing. It will if you don't control it. There's this other quote, and I'll wrap it up with this, and I think it kind of encapsulates fear, but it's from Alex Hormozy. He says, if you want to see who has the most control over your life, just look at who you blame. If you want to see who has the most control over your life, just look at who you blame. Ask yourself the question, is that blame fear? Are you blaming fear for things? And if so, can you overcome it? Can you start small and find small steps to put you in the right direction? What can you do to start overcoming it? What can you do to get better? You got to be honest with yourself. And you might have to start really small, and that's totally okay. As long as you're trying, just get after it. And that's it. That's all I got for you guys this week. So I will say this. Next Monday, I am recording a podcast with Rob Jones, who is he's a double amputee below the knees. Maybe it's above the knees. But he was a war victim, and he lost both his legs in combat. But that didn't stop him. The dude ran 31 marathons in 31 days. That's insane. Kind of makes me feel like a clown. The more I'm like, oh yeah, I'm training for a sub-3. It's like, this guy ran 31 marathons in 31 days. But I'm interviewing him on Labor Day. And so if you have any questions you want me to ask him or anything like that, send them my way. I'm happy to. Again, his name's Rob Jones. Really excited to talk to him. And if you have any other guests that you're interested in having me on, let me know. If by anything I'm saying is like important or has resonated with you at all, I'd love it if you'd share it with other people. I think there's a lot of people out there who need a message like this. Not saying from me directly, but maybe from you. But get out there, share the message, push yourself, try hard things, and get after it, baby. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Until next week, keep getting after it.